Hi, thank you guys for coming out and spending your beautiful Sunday afternoon indoors with us to learn some about monk seals. And it's great to see a bunch of familiar faces from the volunteer crew. And so I am a research ecologist with NOAA's Hawaiian monk seal research program. And so I spend a lot of my time thinking about learning more about monk seals and how we can use what we know about monk seals for conservation and managing this endangered species in Hawaii. And so today I'm going to talk monk seal whispering. So we're going to talk about some of the types of situations we have to respond to when monk seals kind of get themselves in trouble, and some of the new methods we're trying to come up with to make those responses a little more effective. So just to start you guys out with some background on Hawaiian monk seals. So they're a native Hawaiian species. They only exist in the Hawaiian Islands and nowhere else on the planet. So as you can see, that's us pretty isolated there in the middle of the Pacific. And while this looks like a tiny little space in terms of the ocean, we're still talking about an area that is thousands of kilometers long, still like almost the span of the continental US. And Hawaiian monk seals do inhabit the entire Hawaiian archipelago. So that includes what we think of as the main Hawaiian islands, the 8 islands that are populated that we're in right now, as well as the northwestern Hawaiian islands out in the Papahina-Makuakea Marine National Monument. So all the way from Big Island to the teeny tiny Kuri Atoll out there and the various reefs, atolls, and little tiny islands in between. And so we've got about 600 kilometers for the main islands and another 1,750 kilometers for the main islands. So even though it's the one space in the world, still quite a lot of habitat for monk seals. And so we've got different levels of population in the northwestern and in the main islands. And so, as you might imagine, this larger stretch of area includes a lot more monk seals. So we've got around 1,100 that are left, over 900, and these are our numbers from the 2014 census. So over 900 were in the Northwest Hawaiian Islands, and just under 200 were in the main islands. And while these are all sort of the same overall population of the same species, these different segments have some different stuff going on with them. And there are different challenges to the species in the northwestern and the main islands. And so the main islands population is actually doing a little better and growing a little bit, whereas the Northwest Hawaiian Islands population is actually being a little more challenged and they're experiencing some more decline. And so like I said, so main versus Northwest Hawaiian Islands seal populations, there's still monk seals. Everywhere a monk seal is a monk seal, and they forage along ocean bottoms. They're getting various fish, crustaceans, and other things. And they also haul out on beaches to have their pups and have rest time on the beaches. But kind of beyond the basic similarities, as you can imagine, the habitat is quite different in the Northwest and the main Hawaiian Islands. Northwest Islands, tiny, uninhabited, low-lying islands, high islands, stretches of beach between large bits of rock and cities and everything else in the main islands. And so along with these different habitats, you can imagine that what's facing monk seal populations in these different places is pretty different. So in the Northwest Islands, we have seals struggling with getting stuck in derelict marine debris that circulates out in the Pacific. We also have a lot of problems with food limitation. Juveniles in the Northwest Islands have a lot of sharks, a lot of big jacks to compete with, and it can be really difficult for them to really make a start in life once they start feeding on their own. So we often see really poor juvenile survival at some of the sites up there. But in the main islands, we don't have as much of those issues. But seals here we see fatter juveniles, better juvenile survival, better reproductive rates. That's why the population's doing a little bit better in the main islands. But they still face some challenges, and a lot of those have to do with the people that they're sharing the main islands with. So, yeah, did any of you take this picture?
Yeah, we did.
So we definitely We definitely have a lot of potential for animal disturbance in the main islands where they're dealing with very populated beaches, and also just a number of other issues and challenges that can come with living in a very human impacted environment. And seals often, so you can see this guy is swimming under a boat in the boat harbor. And you can imagine all sorts of dangers that go along with that. I think, was it last summer, we had a young seal on Hawaii, was killed by a propeller strike. You can imagine there could be, they could be eating fish parts and getting habituated in a harbor. There could be pollutants, all sorts of things that they could get into. And so a lot of these issues in the main islands make a lot of our job doing not just, research in a lab or behind a computer, but actually on the ground, also doing a lot of activities to keep monk seals safe and just sort of dealing with all the situations they get themselves into. And so some of the things that we do are emergency responses. So we respond to a lot of hooked seals, try to get fish hooks out of seals whenever we can. And sometimes that's a simple procedure on the beach. Sometimes it involves an operation with our veterinarian. And we also have other types of medical care we can do. This is R1KU. She's been a couple years ago. She had this horrible infection in her eye that was impacting her ability to see and swim and forage. So we actually brought her in. A vet removed that bad eye, and then here she is in one of our recovery pools learning to forage as a one-eyed seal. And she got released back at Niihau and is doing great. They saw her on this year's Niihau surveys. So one of the seals that sort of benefited from some of our medical care. And then we also do some displacements. And so when we're talking about displacements, what I mean is doing something to motivate an animal to get away from a dangerous situation. And usually the way we do that is by scaring them, by walking up to them with these crowding boards with a totally fantastic, very attentive in all sorts of directions crew like you see here. And so this sort of displacement activities and coming up with hopefully better ways and more effective ways to do this is sort of the main thing I want to talk to you guys about today. And so first, let's talk about, this is an endangered seal. It's hanging out in a place it chose to haul up. So why would we want to go and displace a seal from where it decided to haul up and take a nap? And there's actually quite a few reasons because, seals are not super familiar with human environments, so they don't always choose a great safe place to haul up. So one of the reasons we might want to displace a seal is if they're in just a really obviously immediately dangerous place. Like here's a seal on a boat ramp. That's just a bad idea. And this is something that, whether we could actually train a seal to stay away from a boat ramp forever or just get it out of the way for, that day, still a win. We just want that seal out of that situation as soon as possible so that they're avoiding car strikes and boat strikes. But then you also have other reasons situations can be dangerous. So again, like with seals at things like boat harbors, but aside from dangers of boat strikes, they might be getting fish. They could be getting habituated to these non-natural sources of food. This is a seal that's been lately cruising around the Kona Kampachi pens out off Big Island. And, so far we don't think it's been getting fish really, but it's definitely a situation that we're watching and the fish pen managers are watching. Like we want to know if the seal is getting habituated to, go in, like getting into the habit of going in and trying to get some easy non-natural food source. And that's a thing we really want to avoid. And then also in some of these more unnatural seal habitat areas that they can find in a populated area, we have concerns like exposures to pollutants or disease agents. And so this is a seal we call R912, or her nickname is Nihoa, and she got into the habit of hanging out in a canal up on the west side. And, you can imagine all the things that run down a storm drainage canal might be bad to swim. Could be bad for your health, could be pollutants, could be grocery carts, could be diseases. This graphic just shows one of the diseases that we've had trouble with monk seals. A few seals have gotten very sick, a couple mortalities from toxoplasmosis, which is a disease that cats carry, but then the oocyst, the little like egg of this parasite that causes the disease, gets washed away with freshwater runoff. So things like these freshwater storm drains or canals or sometimes even rivers can carry these pathogens from the terrestrial environment to the water, and that can be a source of infection for seals. So again, these are just things that create concerns with some of these untypical seal habitats. And another concern is human safety and interactions with people. So these are a couple of seals at the Poipu Beach on Kauai, and for a while they had a couple of juvenile males that really liked to get into their displays and fighting in the Kiki Pool. And it was decided that that was probably not a real safe situation. And so that was a situation where we ended up doing some displacement, because that was considered like a pretty big danger for everyone involved. But then on this side, this is a seal on the Big Island that's been hanging out where they do the manta ray night dives. And, so far, she's just hanging out. People are getting amazing views of this monk seal and the manta rays. But if anyone was here and saw Mark's talk last week, he talked a lot about social media and how we get really cool information, updates, heads up about things from social media. Here's an Instagram post from some folks. I know you can't read the text, but this was just an Instagram post from people that were seeing this seal out at the manta dive and commenting, "Whoa, it's kind of weird that she's not afraid of people." And that's like one of the early signs that we, kind of pricks our ears up, and we're like, all right, we want to keep an eye on this seal, because we've had some really bad luck when seals have gotten too used to people and too friendly with people and start interacting with people. And so this is kind of, the why we want to avoid this sort of habituation of seals to people. And this can mean playing with people. I think this was RO42 or RM42. But so we've had a couple of seals, and especially those that were sort of born in areas with very few other seals around when they were young. People thought they were adorable. They started playing. The seal thought it was fun. All of a sudden, the seal's 300 pounds. It's not fun anymore. Someone gets hurt. And so in some cases, when there's been like serious human safety concerns and, then serious backlash against seal concerns, there have been a couple of seals that we've moved and relocated up to the Northwest Hawaiian Islands. And, you guys are an astute crowd. You were paying attention earlier when I told you life is not as easy in the Northwest Hawaiian Islands. So as you can imagine, we don't like to do that. It doesn't always turn out very well. This is the track of just last year. There was a seal getting a little friendly with folks around I think Maui and Lanai. RLO6, she was a young female, and so we relocated her to Nihoa Island up in the Northwesterns. And she kind of cruised around for a little while, and she's like, "Whoa, what's going on here? I don't know about this habitat. I'm going to check out over here, maybe over here. Whoa, I disappeared in the middle of the ocean." So these are not moves that we like to do. So we would rather avoid these sort of seal-human interactions and dangerous situations and not be put in the position to try to have to move an animal out of its regular habitat. And, and we're not even the worst off with Hawaiian monk seals, right? Like, we are still in a really good place. We're early in the game. Seals are just starting to be a growing population in the main islands. We can still try to work with the public, work with these behavioral modifications for seals, and try to avoid situations like in California where you just have sea lions taking over boat ramps and being on people's boats. And you can imagine this does not go well for human seal sea lion coexistence. And then you have really sad examples like where seals are depredating on fishing operations, and people do much scarier things than displacing seals. So all of these are kind of the road we don't want. We don't ever want Hawaiian monk seals to have to go down. So these are all reasons why we think of, doing some displacement activities to sort of scare seals away from situations that might be dangerous. And there are times when it's a good idea and times when it might be a bad idea. So times when we think displacement could be a good idea is when there's a really definite, distinct threat to seals or people, right? Because if we're just like, kind of not sure, we don't know if this is a great area, for the most part, we don't want to mess with an animal's decision of what its habitat might be, right? And we don't want to disturb an endangered species unnecessarily. So we're really, but clear and present danger here when you're at the bottom of a boat ramp. So that's a really clear situation. Also, if we're going to displace the seal from one area, we want that to be someplace with sort of defined borders or boundaries, like a distinct place of like, we want the seal to go out of area X. So something like the Kiki Pool, where it's like, all right, we want to scare it beyond the rock wall. Then we're good. It can go swim to another area. And then the other part of that is there better be a better area nearby for it to go to, because we don't want to like try to displace the seal from, this dangerous situation here if it only has worse or just as bad places to go to. So those are kind of where we think it could be a good idea to displace seals. Times when we're not going to opt for displacing an animal. If we're talking about a situation where maybe the seal is just inconvenient or annoys people, or maybe, I'd rather the seal not be fishing where I like to fish, or seals smell funny, I wish it wasn't on my beach, we're probably not going to entertain that as a real danger and a situation that we need to react. Also, though, sort of totally unbounded or really amorphous areas. So like the other night, we were just talking, Rocky got a whole lot of attention for being up on the beach in Waikiki, and it's like, there's definitely potential for the seal to be disturbed or interact with people. But where the heck are you going to ask a seal to go from Waikiki? Right? So where, it's a very hard to define, what do we displace her from? Because it's not a very, distinct area. And then sort of our other criteria, the thing, there better be some better habitat for her to go to nearby. And so in this situation where there's just not any place much different or better nearby, that's another situation where even if we don't love where that seal is or it's inconvenient for some people, we might not run out there with crowding boards to displace the animal because we're just not necessarily going to gain anything by moving that seal off of that beach. But so these are some examples of where we have displaced seals. So particularly the Ko'oloa landing boat ramp on Kauai. They get a seal there maybe 2 or 3 times a year that they have to displace. And so these are a couple of our colleagues on Kauai, Jamie and Mimi. And this is our little stop motion animation of that displacement. So basically they just walk up to the seal with some crowding boards. Seal gets annoyed, goes in the water, goes away. And a couple months later, they might have to do it again. The Kiki Pool, like I was saying, especially, so this kind of started back when there were these couple of juvenile males and they would fight in the Kiki Pool a lot. And so that was kind of like, all right, Kiki Pool, no-go zone. It's a really clear boundary. We can just scare seals, get them at least, beyond that wall. They can go, 100 yards over and haul up on way better, safer beach. And they get seals 3, 4, 5 times a year that haul out at the Kiki Pool and they displace. And sometimes it's different seals. They've had a couple repeat visitors. I think they've had one seal that they've displaced 4 or 5 times. So they do sometimes come back. Sometimes they stay gone for a while, sometimes not. And then locally, we have our girl, the R912, who she just got nicknamed the Canal CEO after a while because she was just about always there, and she would hang out in the and I never did correct my spelling on that. I apologize, but that's the Maipaloa Canal. And so this was a canal that had a lot of concerns, a lot of rubbish, debris, potential for diseases and contaminants, as we said earlier. And so because of all of these concerns, we were displacing her out of this canal. We ended up displacing her 7 times over the course of 4 months. And so DB was asking me earlier if we considered this a success. Because whether we considered it a success. Because we went out there 7 times. She was still there times at night when we couldn't get out there. She still kept coming back. So we considered this was an inspiration. Because really, some of the Puipu situations where seals keep coming back, this situation with the seal in the canal where she just kept coming back, really made us think man, we really want some more effective tools to displace an animal out of a dangerous area. So it made us think, well, maybe we could use unpleasant sounds to make that displacement process a little bit scarier, give the seal a little higher motivation not to come back. And so this gets into, this is my highly technical schematic of how behavioral modification might work. So you have a stimulus and you have a response. So here we have Brenda providing a stimulus. It's a panel that she's going to use to try to crowd the seal away from the canal. And here's Nihoa offering a response, which, if I'm translating seal correctly, seems to, amount to, I'm sort of annoyed at you. Right. And so we're hoping that maybe we could add, some scary sounds to this situation to get a bigger stimulus, to hopefully get a bigger response, and actually get the seal to go away and stay away. And so this is sort of our simplistic, idealized view of how we hope this goes. But we definitely have to acknowledge it's a little more complicated than just stimulus and response, right? Because has anyone trained a dog or an animal of any sort? How do you feel about consistency in your training routine? It's pretty important. So if you aren't consistent in providing that stimulus, the animal doesn't necessarily have a clear idea of what they're supposed to be responding to. And so like in this case, we don't go and wait in canals in the middle of the night. So if she's there at night, we can't be there to provide that stimulus to get her out of the canal. So consistency with a wild animal that shows up when you least expect it is not always easy. And there's also issues of motivation, right? So we're going to motivate her with some annoyance to get out of an area. But what's motivating her to be in that area? So we think that in situations where a seal is just in a lousy haul-out spot and they just want to rest on that beach, making that beach more annoying might be a really useful tool. But in the case where they have other motivators, so like Nihoa had developed her whole own technique of smacking the water to get fish out of the canal. So there was a definite food motivator in this situation. There's Mark narrating his video. She's getting a tilapia. Yeah. So when we're competing against a food motivator with an annoyance motivator, our chances are much less good that we're going to have the impact that we want. So that's especially where, like with boat harbors or like the fish pens, we really want to think about these things before an animal gets habituated or used to, getting food from some of these places. But, so, in the right situation, sounds can be a really strong stimulus, right? You've all probably heard of Pavlov's dogs. The dog hears a dinner bell, it starts salivating because it knows the food is coming. Sound in dog training, like these clicker devices, has become really popular. You guys immediately know how to respond when you hear this sound. You know something scary is going to happen. And so we're hoping that we can use these sound stimuli to motivate seals to displace when we want them to. And so sounds are used often in the very positive training realm, so much like the clickers. The Waikiki Aquarium has used sound devices, some to help train their seals to present themselves, to get blood draws and things like that. And I think it's something they've just tried a little bit, but it sounds like they've had some good success getting the animals to respond to sounds. And then there's also like more negative reinforcement of sound. So like the pingers, the little devices that make like a noise that gets put on fish nets to keep dolphins away. And these have a reputation for often working quite well at first. The animal is pretty freaked out, but then the animal realizes the sound is associated with a net full of fish. So again, with those competing motivators, do you stay away from the scary sound or do you go towards it because there's fish there? But then there's also been situations where with seals and sea lions, sounds have been pretty effective for keeping them away from aquaculture operations. And so I'm going to show you guys a video. This is a gray seal in a sound trial. And this seal, so here in this first trial, it's just, learning the ropes. It's getting a fish out of this little dispenser. And then they play some sounds at it. It's like, oh, that was annoying. Hey, I want this fish. And so then in subsequent trials, the seal starts to know, oh, that siren means the scary noise is coming. Whoa, scary noise, go away. And so over the course of the trials, the seal kind of learns, when I hear this noise, I should go away because the really scary sound is going to come. It's like, yep, no, I'm out of here. Not going to deal with that scary noise again. So in this research, they found that these noises that are just an inherent, like really basic, like startle noise were really effective. And so we're going to do some research and try to figure out how we can startle seals. And so we've got a sound system all rigged up, and we've got a number of candidate sounds. So it might be explosives or air horn noises, or maybe seals are going to be more motivated by things that might be freaky in their environment. They could have had a bad experience, like with a boat motor. Certainly in some places, seals have whale predators. So it was like, well, maybe predator sounds would be useful and scary if you're a seal. So all of these are sorts of sounds that we're going to give a try and see what might be the most effective. And so this is a picture of our sound system. So we basically have a small amp that plugs into a little scooter battery and a transformer to keep us from shocking ourselves on our underwater speaker. And so you can see this is my phone. It just runs off of little MP3 players or files that can be on anyone's phone. So you can see this is all pretty small. So this all fits in a 5-gallon bucket that we can just carry out to the beach. And then this is an underwater speaker. And so we kind of carry out our bucket of sound gear, speaker can drop in the water. And as we displace the seal and scare them away with crowning boards, we can play some of the scary noises in the air to make that process a little scarier. Then we can dunk the speaker in the water, play sounds as they move away to hopefully make that whole area seem a little more scary, a little less appealing for the seal to come back to. But we are still dealing with an endangered species, so not just how do we startle a seal, but how do we safely startle among seal? Because we definitely, we want to freak the animal out a little bit to make them stay away. We don't want to hurt them, right? So we've been doing a lot of work on developing our protocol, and so we know we're not going to play with this, if the seal starts checking out the speaker, no more sound. Like we don't play the speaker if the seal comes within 1 meter of it. And we also have sound safety exposure guidelines. So these come from NOAA guidelines, which are mostly based on experiments that people have done, especially thinking about impacts of Navy sonar and development noises and so other noises. But so we have guidelines of, you're going to cause some hearing loss at this level and some pain at this level. And those also go along with time frames. So like at 130 decibels, we might be able to play sounds for 5 minutes without doing any harm. If it's 160 decibels, maybe we can only play for 30 seconds until it would be harmful. So we have some good tables that kind of tell us for which sound type and which device at which volume, how long we can play it and still be within a safe level. So we're very careful about all of that. And then there's also when do we want to try to startle among seals. So again, this kind of goes back to that when it's a good idea versus a bad idea to displace an animal. And so now that we kind of have our protocols in place, we are now kind of on the lookout when we actually have one of these situations where it's one of these clear, yes, we want to use displacement, we want to get the seal out of this area. Now we have these new sound tools that we can start using, and honestly, this has been a little bit in development to get the right sound system and figure out what protocols are safe. And so we're kind of just now ready to hit the road with this. So you guys are getting in on the ground level, and we're all going to learn together and see how effective this is and how we can make it the most effective.
Do you have any candidates in mind?
We think probably the Pleifu Kiki Pool is going to be probably the most likely, just because seals pretty regularly come there. We know it's a good, not good situation, but it's it kind of fits our textbook of like, this is a reasonable time and place to displace an animal. And we've got a good team on Kauai that's sort of ever ready to go do that. So that's probably, we will send them our bucket of sound gear because we think they are the most likely to have a seal to displace it. We should. We haven't. I don't think we've been doing displacements at Turtle Bay yet, but it's a very similar situation. So we'll definitely. It's a situation we'll have to talk about for sure, because definitely as the seal population grows and we have a lot more human seal overlap, we want to manage that in a smart way, but we also don't want to get ourselves into a situation where we have to micromanage where every seal hauls out. So, but yeah, I think we'll have to evaluate it for sure.
There is areas outside of that.
Mhm. Yeah.
Also, get it before, it's really it's interacting with people because it's just starting. So.
Has he been interacting with people, or mostly just hauling out
Someone
there?
just came down and there's a bunch of people there. He's interested.
Interested seals. That's where it all starts. Yeah.
Do you ever use electric shock?
We have not. That has actually been a question that's come up because certainly they use cattle prods and things like that, and I think they have used electric shocks on sea lions in the Northwest. And we have kind of started thinking about whether there are safe options for doing that, but we haven't gotten very far down that road yet. Yeah. There were some tests done with monk seal hearing, I think more physiological, where they actually use recorded sounds and instruments just to measure what their auditory nerve response is. Yeah, so they've got sort of a range of frequencies that they're sensitive to. I don't think they've done volume trials with seals, but yeah, so we have some idea, and I think it was lower frequencies that they're more sensitive to. For sure. Absolutely, and there's been quite a bit, less on monk seals, but there's been a lot of marine mammal hearing research done because, of course, since they're communicating underwater, and it's more with whales, right, because they rely on that communication so much that their hearing and their range of hearing is really important. So there's been a lot of research towards it. Like I said, a little less for seals than for whales, but there have been at least some studies that give us some good boundaries on what we think could be at least audible to a seal. Yeah.
I know you don't have data for the ones, so yeah, you know from there, so that's what other animals we find successful. The displacement technique gets a
Yeah, so I don't know. Definitely with whales, learning is very cultural. And so when one whale sort of picks something up, they, in whatever communication way within a pod, others will learn that. It would be interesting with monk seals because they're a lot less social. They don't hang out in pods the way whales do, but they do encounter each other. They do haul up together. They are sometimes together. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think we have really any studies to say one way or the other if they learn things culturally, but it would be really interesting to see, and they certainly could.